Welcome along to Crunching Gears, Season 1, Episode 7. This is a very special episode where I'm joined by one of the legends of Irish rallying. This guy in the late 90s and early to mid 90s was one of the fastest drivers in Ireland. Andrew Nesbitt, a name synonymous just with high-speed rallying. Andrew's going to tell us in this episode about his early career and his first Donegal win, and what happened afterwards. Andrew turned 60 this month, and I'd just like to wish him a very happy birthday and really tell him how much I appreciate spending so much time with him over the last while, bringing this all together. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed recording it.
I think, I've been out watching stages yesterday and again this morning, and, Andrew has got the very best technology, there's no doubt about that. Fair play to the guy, he's also making the very best use of it. He's driving the car in the middle of the road, and there's just no way these guys are going to stay in touch with him.
Well, the rally's only half over, as you know, and for me it's very hard to keep the concentration. I think the only thing is to continue maximum attack.
So we're not going to see a half effort, we're going to see a full effort.
Yeah, absolutely.
26 comes way back, come back. For the wall, keeps coming back. Come back. Hairpin junction, right 26, left 26. Wind up 26, left 26. 26. Square left 24. Double square right 24, tightens downhill, easy Andrew, easy.
This is Nesbitt territory. His commitment on this stage has never been in question, despite the fact that he's perished on it in the past. Now, in these conditions, on these tyres, his commitment is even more impressive, and he takes a staggering 24 seconds off Eugene.
Bertie Fisher and Andrew Nesbitt have made the 1999 event a classic, as we have already said. Never has so much been provided for so many by so few.
This week on Crunching Gears, the podcast, we speak to the legend Andrew Nesbitt. Andrew, welcome to Crunching Gears.
It's a pleasure to be on the radio with you today, Cavan, on Crunching Gears, the whole way from Donegal, believe it or not. And it's a real pleasure to be on with you today.
Thank you very much. We're going to have a wee look back here at your career through the years. How did you get involved in rallying in the first place, Andrew?
Well, that goes way back to probably 76, 77. And in 76, I was 16 years old, and I remember going to watch the Circuit of Ireland way back in the day with a couple of friends from Katie and Darkley. Eric Nesbitt was his name. And we went to watch this motorsport coming through the forest down in Newcastle. And I really felt, the need for speed back then. And it was always about how quickly could I get my driving license? How quickly could I get a car? Could I keep it on the road? It turned out to be a bit of a problem, because I did achieve getting the license in 77, September, on my birthday, which was the 2nd of September. And 10 days later, I was leaving a friend home from a dance outside Armagh, and we managed to put it through the hedge and take four concrete posts out at the time. Remember the concrete posts sticking right bang in the front of the radiator of the beautiful Cortina E-Type. It used to be my aunt's car from Castleblaney, and my dad did a bit of a deal with her to get the car, but lo and behold, it didn't last too long. We run out of talent just outside Newton Hamilton, and I suppose that was the start of me getting into the need for speed, as we talk about. And from there on, I was on my own, I can tell you, when it came to cars after that, because if you hit them, you had to fix them. But at that time, way back in the early 70s, we were working around South Armagh and the borders. We were international animal livestock movers at the time. And we all, I just loved driving. And each time I got a car, I just needed to get one a little bit faster and quicker. And so I did that for 3 or 4 years, but believe it or not, the money ran out very quickly, because I think I was on my 3rd car within 7 or 8 months, and obviously was running out of talent at a serious rate of knots and money. And But you know what? I got to know the roads around home very well, around the back at Darkley and Newton Hamilton and Castleblaney. And lo and behold, for a few years later, then the Circuit of Ireland used to come round those roads. And I always had this urge to compete in the Circuit of Ireland and to compete in motorsport. So back in 1977, a friend of mine, Trevor Henry, the late Trevor Henry, had bought a Mark I Escort, and he decided he'd start rallying that. And I became his navigator, believe it or not,
Right.
at a very young age of 17. And that gave me the encouragement and the need to, get my own car and start driving. So I navigated for 2 or 3 rallies. And I remember the first rally going to, it was Monaghan, and shouting at him to slow down. You don't do that when you're trying to win a rally. And we got to the end of the stage and he says, Andrew, you have to encourage me to go harder, not to slow down. But the problem for me was I wasn't in control of the car, nor the steering wheel. And at that point, after my second event, I realized I had to have the steering wheel side and not the navigator side. So that was probably the start of my rallying back in the day. So I was doing that for 2 or 3 years, and believe it or not, I gave it up then because I run out of money, and started pulling tug of war for Northern Ireland. First of all for Rich Hill, and then secondly for Northern Ireland, and we competed at world level, world championship level at the time, and we competed against people the likes of Bowley from the Republic of Ireland, the teams from Spain and Italy and Germany and Canada, USA, all over the world. And that in itself was a great sport for me because I had to be very fit, very oriented towards training, very disciplined. And I was for those 3 or 4 years of in the tug of war field. And at the same time, I moved to Dublin to start working for the company I now own in partnership with my colleagues. And that was to carry on with my refrigeration career. I started off with A&N Chiliday back in the day outside Armagh, in a little place called Tassa, and it's very famous now for Basil Shields' pub. And you see the truck run every year and the tractor run that Sean McCardle, who also I competed with in Donegal over the years. I actually went to school with Sean.
Right.
So the motorsport was around us at the time, and people like Winston Henry, he was a great Mark II escort man. If you remember the yellow BIB 8888, well, he was so encouraging in the area for us young boys to get into motorsport. And following that, we had another guy called Derek Henry, Trevor Henry. Derek was a bit of a wild card. He would have went for a pound of butter on a Sunday for his mother and wouldn't have come home with a car. He'd left it around some lamppost or something. It seemed to be the norm. I think he went through about 10 different cars in a 2-year period, and every one of those cars he was just going to the shop for the mother. But it was hilarious. But those guys always had the need for speed in the South Armagh, and I suppose it rubbed off on myself. The likes of Norman Armstrong and David Armstrong, and now the younger ones, Brian, and all of those lads, they're all brought up around rally cars. And we had a great collection of people in the countryside that were all, the only thing they lived for was driving cars. And we'd been closing roads off, or even going into the forest. There was a forest outside Newton Hamilton, and a friend of mine back in the day, 1978, and he said, Andrew, would you give me a spin in your rally car? And at this time I had a yellow RX3 Mazda with a zooped up engine in it and a half roll cage. And I said, no problem at all. I didn't even take time to put the shoes on. I went barefoot, jumped into the car, got him into the car, and it happened to be the 12th of July in Newton Hamilton that year. So we went out into the forest anyway, and we were going great guns. And he says, this is some fun, Andrew. Absolutely. We come down into this square right and then a square left, or whatever you would have called it in my notes now, and got her down through the gears. First gear, didn't I turn the corner too quickly, hit the inside wheel and rolled at 5 miles an hour onto his roof, upside down. Oh my goodness. And I had no shoes. I had to walk barefooted for 1.5 miles out of that forest. It was the worst experience of my life in terms of footwear, I can tell you. So that was me starting my rally career back in the day.
Yeah.
And you know, we had a great time.
Mm-hmm.
Would I do it all over again? Absolutely. But you know, then moving forward after the tug of war, I competed at that at international level throughout the world for 5 years, 4 years in total, pulling the rope, and then 2 years actually coaching. And we coached that team. It was the Rich Hill team, and there's many great characters in that. And they've gone on since to win the World Championships 3 times in a row and over the last 10 years. And at that time, it was all about diet, food, and the food you eat and the miles you covered. We used to actually go across the moorings every Sunday morning. We do 10 miles running, and we only ever had an hour and a half to do it. We were timed.
Yeah.
And my goodness, it was a tough session. And if someone fell, which, you know, someone might have cut their knee or hurt their ankle, their mates had to carry them home. There was no such thing as not finishing the test run. And it was brutally hard. But at that point, I learned how to be physically fit and look after my diet, my whole weight program. And that stood to me when I got into motorsport seriously a few years later. I remember in 1988, Langley Humphreys from Belfast was selling his green and white Mark II Escort. It was the most beautiful car. And I called up to see him, and he was stopping rallying because he was just after getting married.
Right.
I was starting rallying because I was just after getting married. It was one of those rarities. It was great. And to be allowed to go and buy my first proper rally car, it was a 2.4 Holby engine Mark II Escort. And for those who know the car, it was so quick.
Yeah.
And it was so torquey. And I used to race the likes of the Opel Manta 400s with that car. I remember racing Billy Coleman. It was, let me think, it was a green Opel 400, and it was Billy Connolly's car.
Yes, Stevie Emerson.
For Red Mills.
Yeah.
And this weekend, Brad Murphy, by the way, was sitting with me with the cars up until that very day, and Ronan McNamee sat in with me because Brian couldn't sit with me that day. He had a bereavement at the time, and I remember Ronan sitting in, and Ronan was a world champion, world navigator, and he navigated for Pentia Ricula at the time.
That's right, yeah.
And he put the rally overalls on and the helmet and said, "Andrew, I'll sit with you." And we were doing the Cooley Mountains, and we were coming to the last stage. All we had to do was finish the stage. And we had the rally won by probably over 1.5 minutes.
Right.
And the next thing, these beautiful 4 woolly sheep came off the side of the mountain in front of me. And being an animal lover that I am, I swerved to miss them. I regret doing that, I can tell you. I swerved to miss them, and I hit a rock with the back wheel of the car. We were going uphill at the time, of all things, and we were doing about 118 miles an hour uphill. This thing could go. Well, here we hit the rock anyway, and we fortunately went up the bank on the right-hand side and hit a rock about, 25 meters up the hill. Hit the rock, rolled the car. We went flying back onto the road. We both took a bit of a hammering. Ronan McNamee's helmet split in two, and he was okay, thank God. It had gone off on the left, would have been still rolling. You would have rolled for about 1.5 to 2 miles down that mountain.
Oh, yeah.
and we were so lucky, crashed on the, albeit a bad crash, but on the right side of the mountain, not to actually keep rolling forever. And Ronan, I remember so clearly, we got out of the car and we walked up to the next junction, which was only about 150 meters away. And Ronan took the helmet and he says, Andrew, do you see that helmet there? I do. It's cracked in two. He says, I am never sitting in a rally car again.
Right.
I am going to focus on my job, which was Cuisine de France at the time. And he never sat in a rally car again, ever. He got the biggest fright of his life in that car. So we scrapped, we hit the car so hard, it had to be scrapped after that. But I actually sold that car, an engine at the time, down to Tandragee. Tommy Reid was his name.
Right, yeah.
And Tommy was a great man for Formula Fords and rally cars and mud plugging and all of this. But the reason he wanted that car was he heard about this 2.4 Holby engine. And he specialized in building engines, but he wanted to get his hands on this engine to put it on the dyno that he had, because he couldn't believe the torque that was coming out of this car. And it was fit to beat Opel Manta 400s easily. That's how quick it was. So it was probably the fastest Mark II Escort in Ireland at the time, and probably remained as the fastest Mark II Escort for all of 20 years until this new technology has come out. Millingtons and all of the new tech that the boys are building. So that's where that car went, and that's where the car finished up. But that was my Mark II entry into Donegal in that car.
That's right. Done 2 years in the month and Mark II at that time, didn't you?
That was the Mark II. I think we first, Brian Murphy and I went to Donegal for the first time. I'm going to say, is it 88?
88 is right. Yep.
And I think we finished in the top 20. Probably. I'm going to say 16th overall out of a field of 150 cars at the time. I now know it's restricted to 140, but it was 150 at the time, and that was our entry into Donegal, and we absolutely loved it. And it was also the first time to get to meet, the people who run the motorsport at the time, the likes of Cynthia Fury and Ivan Fury and Matt Doherty and all of those people back in the day, and it was great. But you know what? They gave us a lesson in terms of, you weren't allowed to be coming up stages the back ways. Doing wrecking had to be done only in a single direction, and all of that. But the likes of Austin McHale and myself, we had to take a run back just to shorten the stage. But I can tell you, we were given a very strong lesson at the time not to do that.
You didn't do it twice,
or you were sent home.
Yes.
And it was great. So that car was very, very, it was a great car. It was very lucky to both Brian and I at the time. It was a very important part of our rallying career. It gave us the pace. And then the following year we came back. We did Lurgan Park straight after that. And, we're probably the new kids on the block, and that's what we were. We were kids. We were a little bit wild behind the ear, so to speak. But the car was just amazing, and it really stood to us. And then we came back the following year to Donegal, and we finished 6th overall, which was quite an achievement in a Mark II Escort with the field that was there. You had Bertie Fisher, you had Austin McHale, you had Vincent Bonner, you had all the big names at the time rallying in Ireland, and to get into the middle of them in the top 10 was really something else. We thought we had won the rally, even though we were only 6th overall. It was one of those great things. And then as I said to you earlier, we took that car to Dundalk, to the Glendevlin Rally, Hotel Rally at the time. And we made sad work of it, going up the hill.
So then the Mark II then was replaced with a Manta then for 1990. As you mentioned before, Brian Murphy also was a very important part of your career too, wasn't he? And then the Manta let you get your first taste of champagne. You won Cavan before Donegal that year again too, didn't you? So.
We did. Cavan was a great place for us. It was very lucky for us because, we've won Donegal International 6 times, but the national rounds in Cavan were so important as the training ground before you do the international. And, I think, we've won it 7 times actually in a row.
Yeah.
But we had different cars.
Yeah.
Each year we had a different car. And there was a car in between before I got to the Manta 400. We had a G3 Escort. And my goodness, what a handful. You need to be a bodybuilder to steer it. It honestly, I remember doing the Monaghan Rally. We finished second overall to Vincent Bonner at the time. And we were never going to be fit to beat him because this thing was just a handful. And you'd be going down the stage and the straight of the road, I'd be having to take my hands off the steering wheel and steer with my knees to get my wrists working again. Right, it was such a handful. And I said to Brian after that rally, I said, Brian, this thing has to go because we're never going to win anything with this.
Right.
And at the same time, Brian said to me, you know what, we'll take a wee little break, Andrew. We'll head off on a holiday. And we finished up in Kenya, in Mombasa. But on the way to Mombasa, Brian, didn't he buy the motoring news at Gatwick Airport? Now, we were reading the papers anyway. And when we got to Mombasa, we were sitting around the pool one day, and he says, Andrew, see that car there? If you bought that car, you become the groom. We're always going to be the bridesmaid in that G3.
Yeah.
In other words, you're going to be second place.
Yeah.
I said to him, Brian, wow, that would be something else. He says, now I know you can't afford it. It's 27,500 and you're building a house. Well, building the house actually had a lot to do with it. We had no money to buy the car, but we had a very good bank manager that was assisting me with the loan of the money to build the house.
Yeah. This
is true, Bill. And Brian and I were sitting at the pool the following morning, and I said, Brian, I've come up with a great idea, but you've got to promise me you can't tell anyone, you won't tell anyone. He says, what's the idea? I said, you know the way we're building the house? If I ring Morris Johnson in the Danske Bank, I think he would give me a bit more money to put the roof on the house. He says, but Andrew, you're not putting the roof on the house. No, but if I used the money that has to go into the roof of the house to buy the Manta, we could rally it for 6 to 8 months and then we sell it and we put the roof on the house. Oh, Brian says, oh, don't do that, Andrew. Oh, please don't do that. I said, why? It's a great idea. He says, I know, but he says, what happens if we crashed and the thing went on fire? Would lose that amount of money. I says, well, there'd be no roof going on the house, Brian, that's for sure. we proceeded to phone Wales anyway. A guy called Ian Pritchard, who has rallied in Ireland since many times along with his son. And he and I became great friends. But I remember phoning him from Mombasa, and he said to me, if you want that car, you need to get a deposit to me straight away. And I says, how much of a deposit do you want? He says, a minimum of £500. I said, you wouldn't hold it till I get back from Africa? He says, no. He says, you're one of these Irish guys? No, if you want the car, you pay up now. So I had to phone home and get my brother Alan, who took up rallying after that as well. And he sent the £500 out for me. So that was back in 92. So we were building the house. We had no money, but we used the roof, money for the roof of the house to buy the rally car. We hadn't at home a wet week till we won Cavan in it.
Yeah.
And that was the entry point into, it was LXI 658, I'll never forget it. I got Philip White Tyres to sponsor me, and we got the whole thing going at the time, and it was some fun.
Uh-huh.
It was just amazing. So we won Cavan that year in that car.
Uh-huh.
And if you look at it, that was really the start of a serious rally career between Brian Murphy and myself.
Mm-hmm.
And we, as I said to you earlier, we went on to win Cavan 7 times.
Yeah.
And each year, it was just such a laugh. And
Mm-hmm.
then we took that car to Donegal,
Yeah.
and we were doing really well. I think we were lying in the top 5 in the car overall, and I pick up a little pebble and I threw the oil belt off.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the one thing that the Opel Manta had a weakness with. It would always throw the oil belt off if it got a little stone in between it.
Right.
And lo and behold, Vincent Bonner threw me out of belt, got her onto the car, and away we went. But we went back down the field that time, and I'm not so sure where we finished.
You pulled back up to 7th, like after losing 2 minutes. And the coverage was on there the other night, and Motorsport Ireland have acquired the rights to RPM. And they interviewed you, and you could see even back in 1990, you were determined that you were going to be up there. You know, you were disappointed that you had lost that 2 minutes, that you were out of the fight for the lead, I suppose. You know, you wanted to be up there battling with the Fishers, the McHales, all these guys. You know.
Well, that's a good one. We finished in the top 7 because I think we were way down the field, way beyond 100 and something.
Right.
The 2 minute drop. But there you again, that's it. That's what competition's about. And back then, it was all about competing against yourself to see how quickly you can get your stage times. And the only way you're going to get stage times against the best is to drive as hard as you can. Mm-hmm. And over the years, anytime if I got a puncture or slid off, I was always determined to get back on as soon as I could to at least learn the pace of the better drivers at the time.
Right. Because
that's the only way you're going to win.
Yeah.
And if you look at the stage times, I think we were right in there again, albeit the oil belt had slipped off the car at that time. But the Manta was very, very good to us. It was a great car. Yeah. And it was actually a lightweight car. It came from New Zealand, and Ian Pritchard had found that car. It was one of the works cars, and there were only ever 10 of them, I think, at the time.
Right.
And I remember we won Cavan, and I got a phone call the following day from Bertie Fisher. Andrew, can I come and see this car of yours? Because he had a lightweight Manta. Yeah. And he thought he had the only one in Ireland until our car arrived. I remember him getting down and looking at the car. It was in the garage in Armagh, and Graham, my son, was there, and he was looking up at Bertie, who was his idol. Yeah, just idolized Bertie, and he was looking at him and saying, "You're Bertie Fisher." And Matthew was Graham was only a young boy at the time, and Bertie was down looking at the car, and he knew by looking at the suspension and the setup of the suspension whether it was a lightweight car or not. And I remember him standing up. He said, "Nesbitt, I don't know how you got it, but this is the real deal." And that was the real McCoy. And if you remember, then we went to we did the Donegal Rally, finished really well, and then within 2 weeks we went to Lorgan Park, and as the footage will show you, we went for a bit of a sail and took a couple of bushes out, took the back quarter panel with it. At least the car didn't go on fire. We still had the money to put the roof on the house. Oh, it's hilarious. The things you do for the love of your sport.
Yes. I'm just looking here at 91. You hired one of the John Price Metros for Donegal that year. That must have been some experience. I jumped into one of them. I think an ex-Group B car. John Price would have been probably like the man to get a Metro off at that time and all too. Like, he recently died there too, I suppose, didn't he?
He did indeed. Yeah, he did indeed. Sadly, he was a great man for the 6R4 Metros, and he always had the best cars. But that year, he actually brought a pup with him. That car that I got into, I couldn't steer it. I couldn't. it must have been set up for circuit racing or something, because it definitely wasn't set up for the roads of Donegal. And I remember it was so fast.
Yeah.
But it kicked and bounced and buck-leapt all over the place. Even in the test, we were testing before the rally, Brian and I, in Donegal. And it was giving me the full of it just to hold the car on the road. So how we were going to do well in the Donegal Rally was really beyond us, because I remember saying to John Price, we need to insure this car. Oh, he says, Andrew, oh, most definitely. He says, but that's going to cost you £3,000. What? £3,000? Anyway, we wrestled the money up between the sponsors at the time, and I remember going to Raymond Donnelly at the time from Donnelly Motors in Dungannon, and he gave me this beautiful bit of sponsorship at the time. It was £500 and a Dear John letter with it. What's a Dear John letter? Dear John, I'm definitely going to sponsor you because you're a great guy and you're going to do so much for Irish motorsport. But that was the first and last he ever sponsored me. It was a thank you letter. Now, you've got your money, now get out of here. So I want to say a big special thank you to Raymond Donnelly for doing that, and to Terence, who have now gone from strength to strength. I think on the back of sponsoring me, actually. But so we were doing really well, and Kenny Colbert, he had a 6R4 Metro, and I was saying to Kenny, this car's not handling well at all. And he looked at the car and he says, Andrew, the wrong suspensions in that car, and the springs are too low. Just be careful when you come to the big bumps of Donegal. And we were doing really well, but way up the back of Milford Mart, we were doing that well. I could see this straight ahead of us, and we were flying. And all of a sudden, there was a dip in the road, and the car kicked. And it would just remind you of one of those horses that you see the cowboys trying to break in the Wild West. This thing kicked in the air, and I swear to you, it must have jumped at least 15 to 18 foot in the air.
Right.
And I remember looking down at the road, standing in the car, holding onto the steering wheel, and Brian's there going, total silence.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, Brian, hold on, because if that's the way it went up in the air, what was it going to not do when it came back down again? Well, it came back down, and let me tell you, up she went again. And she jumped, this time, at least 12 feet in the air. Now, we were totally out of control.
Yeah.
And all it felt like, it was rising. It wasn't coming down. It was rising in the air. And I clearly remember hitting a fir tree at about 15 foot high with the side of the car. And Brian got an awful slap on the side of his helmet. And I used to have these little volume controls because, as you know, I'm partially deaf.
Yeah.
And I perfected these little volume controls on the side of the helmets. We bought them out of England, especially for us, and didn't take the side of the button, the volume control, off Brian's helmet. At the same time, he hit the tree with his head.
Yeah.
And he hadn't a clue where he was. And I'm going, oh my goodness, when this thing comes down, what's going to happen? Well, I then proceeded to hit the side of a rock with my helmet, and it took the switch of my helmet. And here, lo and behold, I got such good clatter on the side of the head. My eye started spinning in my socket in my head. Right. And I remember getting the helmet off when we landed. Now, at this point, sorry, I forgot to tell you, we had taken all the wheels off it.
Right.
Here was a 6R4 World Rally car, no wheels.
Yeah.
And a ball of scrap. And in the middle of the whole thing, I remember, did I pay John Price the insurance money for this car? Because he's going to need it. And I was still in the middle of the accident thinking of this. And all of a sudden, we got landed anyway. And fortunately, she landed into the side of the ditch after taking the top of the fir tree out. Landed anyway, and I got such a slap. The eye was spinning my socket. I said, Brian, are you all right? Oh, yeah. He says, next corner. Are you ready for it? Next corner? What are you talking about? Yeah. I've got the notes here. He hadn't a clue where he was. He'd been knocked out. And he was talking the greatest load of stuff. And I realised at that point I had to get him out of the car, and I got out of the car, and the helmets were absolute pieces. Got him out of the car anyway, and I remember holding my eye with one hand and holding his hand with the other hand, and me trying to guide him, because I knew the way he was talking, there was only two. The only place for both of us was the hospital to see what damage was done. And any time I took my hand from my eye socket, I could see the sky, I could see the ground, I could see the four trees, I could see the remainder of a 6R4 car. Oh my goodness! And we started walking towards the end of the stage, and every car that came along, I was holding on to Brian because he did not know where he was. He was still knocked out, but he was walking wounded. That's what I called him at the time. And we come round this corner anyway, and up against an old school, there was a bicycle sitting. And I said, Brian, we'll borrow the bicycle, and we put the helmets back on us. This is true, Bill. We put the helmets back on. They were in absolute SH1T, but we put them on anyway because I knew that I had to get Brian to hospital as fast as I could, plus myself, because this eye was spinning away. That was some fun. So we borrowed the bicycle. I hope Ivan and Cynthia Fury's listening to this. We borrowed the bicycle. There was no one there. We were reminded afterwards that we stole the bike. Well, it was an emergency situation. And I got Brian onto the back of her. It was one of those seats in the back of her for holding a lunchbox. And it was a rally bicycle, black one, with a set of sheep horn handlebars on it. I'll never forget it. And we headed down that stage as hard as we could go to try and get help. And I remember jumping onto the bike, and just as we were jumping onto the bike, there was this sign saying, scrapyard. And I said to this young fella, by the way, there's boys coming to lift that car. Send her to the scrapyard. It's the only place for her. Oh my goodness. Get on the bicycle anyway, and I cycled as hard as I could with Brian on the back, never thinking there was no brakes on the bike. Well, we came to the first T-junction, and everybody was standing at the T-junction, and Brian's in the back, and I'm waving for them to get out of the road. And at the same time, I was sliding the heels of my boots to try and get this damn bicycle stopped. I says, hospital, take us to the hospital. We went through the tape, right, at a rate of knots on a rally bicycle. We finished their stage all right. It was on a bicycle that we borrowed, well, maybe stolen, but that was so funny. And thankfully there was an ambulance there, and they took us to hospital. And I remember the two of us getting examined, x-rayed. Brian had come round at that stage, but we had to have a head x-rays. And as someone said at the time, boys, it's not the head that we need to examine. He says, your brains is a long way from your head, the way you were driving this rally. Seamus McGettigan says, it's your backside that need to be checking for your brains. It was so funny. But look, we were okay. We turned out that there was no major damage done other than the eye, and my eye settled in. And oh my goodness, it was just one of those days in the Nesbitt camp. But that metro was just completely and utterly destroyed. And I said to John Price afterwards, John, I'm really sorry. I'm so glad I insured the car before we went on that excursion. He says, I never got time to put the money into the insurance. Sure fella. But anyway, that was it.
So it didn't obviously put you off the metros, because you returned, you bought one then for the 92 season.
I did.
So like you must have liked them.
Do you know what? It was a great car. Look at 6R4s.
Yeah.
Tony Pond, all of these famous names at the time, we're all driving them. And the only thing I need to do was get one that I could tame.
Right.
And that would actually compete in Ireland and get the right suspension. And with the help of Kenny Colbert at the time, I did get a good car, and I remember saying to Kenny, "Have I got the right suspension?"
Mm-hmm.
And I met this guy from London, had the car, and he was selling the car because he was just after getting married.
Right.
And what was his name? He was a Greek.
Oh,
Cypriot.
Stephen Verona or something like that, wasn't it?
I used to call him Papadopoulos, so it sounded near enough.
Yeah.
And I remember going over to his house and staying with him and bought the car, and he was so good. He gave me everything that he had with that car, and it was a really lucky car. That was a mint car. But you know what? Brian Murphy would tell you if he was here today that, and he'd be listening into this, I have no doubt, it was a aerodynamic brick.
Right, yeah.
Because the harder you went, if there was any side wind at all, you couldn't control it.
Right.
And I remember doing the stages in Donegal, and it was probably the first time in my life I actually had to slow down. We were going so hard, and depending which shaft you hit in the car, that thing could do up to 150 mile an hour.
Right, yeah.
But my goodness, see, when there was a side wind came at you, and we were going through this valley on the Saturday morning, and we were going up the main road, and there was a big right-hand corner coming at us, and we were going, probably we had her up to about 135 at this point, and the wind started taking it sideways. And I'm going, no, not again, not again. And I got it slowed down enough to not go off the road, but the wind took control of the car. And Brian says, Nesbitt, what are you at? What are you at? He says, we have to finish this rally. I says, Brian, I had nothing to do with that. That was the wind taking the car sideways. We went up the road sideways at 135 mile an hour. Like it was going to be the biggest accident Donegal ever seen.
Yes.
And I got the car slowed down, and I remember clearly after it saying, this car has to go. Because if it's going to control me, I have no control, especially at high speed. But I'm going to take you back. Before that, we did the Cavan Rally.
Yes.
In that car, and we won the Cavan Rally. This is the funny story. I wonder, should I tell you it or not? I probably have to tell you.
You have to know, yeah.
We went to Cavan Rally anyway, and the great Bertie Fisher, along with Rory Kennedy, were doing the rally in a works Subaru. And they were going to do they went to Cavan that day to test the car for the Donegal International Rally.
Yeah.
And we were doing the Cavan Rally as a test for the Donegal Rally also, but never expecting to win against Bertie Fisher in a works Subaru.
Yeah.
And I remember Gene Megan, he was my mentor at the time. Gene was super. He said to me, Andrew, today's your day. He says, you come with me for a walk. So we walked up the street in Cavan and back down again. And if Gene said you could do something, well, you had to believe him. He believed that I could win this rally. More than I did, actually. But he put that sort of edge into me that if I controlled the whole show properly, I could win it. Well, here, we started off anyway. And there was only 4 seconds between Bertie and I for 9 stages. Now, the first 3 stages, I got 4 seconds up on him. The second 3 stages, he brought the 4 seconds back. And the third 3 stages, I took another 4 seconds back. So that meant after the 9th stage, we were leading the rally by 4 seconds. Well, guess what happened? Now, out of all of the rallying in Cavan, there was only ever 3 stages done 3 times.
Yeah.
And that was the way it was for the 6 years that we had won it. Well, what happens? We come out of the end of the 9th stage, and Brian says to me, Murphy says to me, Nesbitt, you're after beating Fisher and Kennedy.
Yeah.
And he goes, yo! And I goes, yo! And we were like celebrating. And there was a place called Nobby's Pub, a half a mile from the end of that stage. And I said, we'll pull in here, and we'll get a quick little glass of water. No, it was a pint of Smithwick's. I'll be very honest with you. We had a pint of Smithwick's and each. And Brian says, we'll have another one. Now, we shouldn't have been doing that because we thought we had the rally won.
Yeah.
And I do not agree with drink and drive, but this did happen. And this young fella came in to the pub to use the toilet, and he said to me, he says, Mr. Nesbitt, what are you doing in here? I says, we're after winning the rally. He says, indeed, and you didn't. He says, there's another stage. I looked at Brian, and he looked at me. I says, that's rubbish. There's only ever been 9 stages in the Cavan Rally. Well, this year they decided to run a 10th one. Oh, my goodness gracious me. Oh, my God. And here we were after sculling back a couple of pints of Sonics. And, you know, I probably shouldn't have won the rally because I shouldn't have been driving, but we drove down to the service area. The service area, we were late, and the boys had to follow us out the road to the start of the stage.
Yeah.
And Brian and I weren't speaking to each other at this point. And the lads arrived out with the fuel can. And oh my goodness, my heart was beating. Here we are. And we had to drive past like 30 cars to get up to the front of the rally. We were 4 seconds in the lead. Bertie Fisher was at the start line. I had to pull around past him. And off we went. Well, we didn't go off. We were counted down. 3 minutes. Stage actually had been delayed. And we were counted down anyway. And Brian says, are you okay to drive? I wouldn't speak to him. And he asked me 3 times. And the third count, he says, Andrew, please answer me. Are you okay to drive this rally car? I says, you're soon going to find out, Brian. And off we went as hard as she would go. And I remember the last corner to this day of that rally. You come over this crest and the hill went downhill about a quarter of a mile to the finish line. And I remember riding the wall on the top of the crest with the Metro.
Yeah.
We were clean off the road and we rode the side of the wall and came back down onto our wheels and finished that stage. And I remember looking in the mirror, counting 1 second, 2 seconds, 3, the whole way through to see how many seconds it would take before Bertie and Rory would come around the corner. And if I got it right, it was exactly 30 seconds from the minute I stopped at the time clock. And if that was the case, we would have won the rally.
Yes.
Guess what? We had exactly the same time, and we won that rally by 4 seconds. And then we got back to town and continued to celebrate. Oh my goodness. Anyway.
Yes. I so Donegal that year then. Donegal that year, you went on to finish 4th, but you had road penalties. If it hadn't been for them penalties, you probably would have been 2nd overall. Like that was like no, the Metro even at that stage was what 7, 8 years behind the technology stakes. That was some result, wasn't it? Really?
It was a great result, but do you know what? We probably would. We were definitely geared to finish up in the top 2 or 3 there. If it weren't for the aerodynamic brick and me having to slow up, that's the fact. I actually had to slow up because the car was scaring me with the speed of it and with the side wind. It was a very windy day that day, and the sun was shining, but the wind was high, and I remember having to slow down. And thankfully, we finished the rally, and we did very well.
So you had a couple of quiet years then. You had Group A in the Evos, and you're out in Bertie's, the ex-Bertie BMW done a couple of events here and there. But then you won the Toyota Celica for 95. Was it nice to be finally in the ultimate machine again, right?
Well, if the truth be told, I had to sell my rally cars to get the house finished. Oh my goodness. Fortunately, we did. And then I hired a Mitsubishi, and we finished up in someone's World Championship flower garden, rose garden. Oh, that didn't last very long. Yes, and then we got the M3. And I bought that from Billy Connolly at the time, Red Mills. what an amazing car. And that was Bertie Fisher's old car.
Yes.
That car, you know, was the only BMW that won a round of the World Championship rally at the time. And it's a very famous car. It's down in Cork at the moment.
Yeah.
Worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
Serious amount of money. And Brian, just like that, we took that car to Cavan. And I remember we were racing four-wheel drive cars at the time. And didn't the rain come in? I says, Brian, we're never going to win Cavan again with this car if we don't drive her on.
Yeah.
On the last stage, I can remember clearly, I hit a bump and I stood her in her nose in the wet. And I did my back in. I got a prolapse disc from it.
Right.
I hit the kick so hard. And James Lackey at the time, he had a four-wheel drive car. And he was coming on very strong. And when the rain came in, fortunately we had enough lead built up to get to the finish line in the wet. My goodness, that was a scary run in the wet in that M3. And again, that was our test debut for that car to come to Donegal then in the M3.
Yeah.
And I've no doubt you'll be able to tell me what happened to that car as well.
Now you're asking me. You put me in the spot. Now, I can't remember actually. Donegal that year, you did do it. And my head is going blank. I think.
Well, I'll let you know what happened. We were going really well in that car across Knockalla, and there was water coming off the side of the stage. And I remember moving to the left, coming across the crest, just right up at the top. And sideways we went.
Oh yes, it's coming back with it.
And we took 16 concrete posts out and stopped on the 17th one.
That's right. And
how I know, because the jock strap between the seat and my legs, every time we hit a post, it's right. It gave the belt a good chuck. There was no more children in the Nesbitt household after that.
You won't let a cowboy for a wee while after that.
And do you know what? Someone sent me a couple of photographs. My son Graham got photographs sent to him there recently, and there it was, Brian and I standing on top of the hill on the mound with only one wheel left on that car. And I remember the front right-hand wheel come off, hub, brake calipers, the whole lot. It was lying in the middle of the road, and I run over and I picked it up, probably in bad temper, and I threw it. Well, here didn't the wheel take off and rolled and rolled and rolled. And the next thing, it disappeared over the cliff. I swear to God, it disappeared over the cliff at a rate of knots. And there's a photograph of Brian and I standing as if we're smiling, laughing. But it wasn't a laughing matter. The wheel took off anyway. And someone got a photograph of that, and it's there. It's available to be seen. Wheel took off, and about a half an hour later, Gene Megan and all the rally team were getting the car gathered up. Oh my goodness, I can see this yet. This old gentleman come walking up the side of the hill, and the closer he got to me, the more I realised he was like wearing fisherman gear. You know, those big long boots on him. And I remember Jeffrey Brown, who was looking after all my rally cars at the time. I have to give Jeffrey a mention. He was brilliant. All of my rally cars never broke down. Only I put them off the road. I had such a great run of luck with Jeffrey at the time. He was amazing looking after my car. And then de Garvey and Stephen Stoops. All of these guys were brilliant. And they never got paid. It was just one of these things that they loved doing, was looking after the rally cars. But I remember them pulling the car out anyway, the putter on the trailer, and this old man came up and he says, "Well, boys, did you happen to lose a wheel by any chance?" I says, we lost 3 wheels actually. Well, he says, I was at the bottom of the cliff fishing in my boat. And he says, this wheel hit the water and it jumped about 20 feet in the air and back down again. And he says, it disappeared. He says, it nearly killed me. Well, I says, I am glad that you can tell the tale. He says, that thing came over the cliff. He says, it must have been 500 feet down. And here, that poor creature could have been killed in the boat.
Yes.
And we wouldn't have known where he went.
No.
he was the luckiest, blessed man I know in Donegal.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. And that's where the wheel went.
Yes.
So she's sitting at the bottom of that cliff somewhere.
If anybody's ever looking for a wheel for the M3.
Yeah, well, if there's those snorkeling boys that do the diving,
Yes.
ever want to find a complete wheel, rim, Brembo calipers, brakes, and disc, it's sitting at the bottom of that cliff.
No, but
That would be a challenge.
Yeah.
That would be a challenge for the divers. I can tell them exactly where it is.
Yeah.
But
100 years' time, some boy snorkeling and finds this.
So that's what happened to M3.
Yeah.
So
then you went on to the Celica then after that. What was, was it nice to be jumping into like a car that was going to give you the opportunity to compete along with Fishers and McHale's and these guys in equal terms now at this stage?
It was an amazing car. Gene Megan and I went over to Belgium along with Kenny McKinstry at the time, and there was a couple of people worked for the Toyota Celica team, the TTE, and we went over with the intention of trying to do a deal. And there was a guy who was the general manager at the time of Toyota TTE at the time, Richard Cregan from Dublin. And I remember meeting up with him after the rally in Belgium. It was the Bucas de Spa rally, and Marco Elaine was driving, and all the top names were competing that weekend. And Gene and I decided if we brought enough money over, we'd maybe have enough to buy an Ulyuk. Well, here, when we were there, Gene said to me, Andrew, if we bought two, do you think would they give us 15% discount? And lo and behold, we were in the pub that night, talking rally talk, talking rubbish most of the time. And there was this guy, Bruce, he was a New Zealander who was running the rally team for TTE. And I remember getting up against this fireplace and saying, Bruce, you have to sell us the car. In fact, we'll buy two. And he thought we were talking gobbledygook at the time, which it probably was. And the next morning I got up anyway. Gene says, Andrew, you take the train and go on down to TTE there and do the deal for the two. And there's a few pound with it. And I landed wrapped the door into TTE, and I asked for Richard Cregan, and I asked for this guy, Bruce. Can't think of the second name. And they met me at the door. And he said, oh, what are you here for, Andrew? I says, I'm here for the two cars. We did the deal last night. Oh, he says, I thought you were only joking. Oh, I says, I wasn't joking. And lo and behold, Richard said to him, he says, if you've done a deal with that man for two cars, you've got to honour it. So let's find them two cars. And we bought the two World Rally cars. And I remember getting these stainless steel fuel tanks with it, and 40 rims and tires and shafts and gearboxes. You talk about the amount of stuff. He says, how are you going to get this home? Oh, I says, Nell McGuire has a 40-foot lorry sitting outside here to take the whole lot with us. We paid for the two cars, and we took the whole lot with us on the spot. And that's how those cars came to Ireland. And thanks to Richard Cregan for making it happen. He was a great guy. So then we came with the World Rally cars, as you know. 96.
95, you had sort of like, you kind of the building year, hadn't you? You had kind of sensible enough. You had seconds, thirds, all that kind of thing. Then really 95.
Yeah, I kept it together. That's what you're really trying to say.
Yeah. you didn't crash.
It's okay. It's okay. We haven't even got to the start of my international rally wins yet.
No.
Yeah, we had a great time in the car, and yeah. So 96 came along, and that was really the year that we had a real good cut at it. Yeah. And I never thought I could win an international rally ever. But it was Donegal, and I remember the pace was so fast. All the big names were there. Bertie Fisher, Os McHale, to mention but a few. They were all at it. And to get in amongst them was fantastic, and to win was even more challenging. And I will say to you, the first win is always the sweetest. It was just amazing. To win my favourite rally in the world favourite county in the world in that Toyota Celica, which was a works car from start to finish.
Yeah.
The biggest problem I had was it was left-hand drive, and I went on to every rally car after that was always left-hand drive, which I'll come to in a moment as to why. But we won that rally, and to come into Letterkenny and thousands and thousands of people, it was just an amazing feeling that year.
Yeah, because I was looking over the times there recently, and like the whole weekend, the slowest time you were was third fastest. Like that was like you were there to win. You weren't there to finish second that weekend. You were going to win that rally. Like, and like there was a few seconds between you and Bertie. James Cullen was only a few seconds behind that again, and then Bertie slid off the road. You get into the lead, and that was it. You weren't going home without that champagne in your pocket, were you?
Well, you know what? That was the first year, and James Cullen was a very difficult man to beat in Donegal. Very talented driver, and we all know the talent that man had. And anytime you came up against him in Donegal, you knew you had your work cut out.
Yeah.
Same with Bertie Fisher as well, Vincent Bonner, all those boys. They were tough competitors.
Yeah.
And really to get into the mix amongst them was, a lifelong dream. I never thought I'd ever win an international, but when the pace was there, it was a matter of trying to control it. Because my records show that I had good days and I also had some bad days.
Yeah. So after Donegal, then things didn't go quite to plan.
No, Donegal in 1996 I had probably had the highest feeling of success ever when I won the 1996 Donegal Rally. And lo and behold, within a month of that, I had the highest low ever in my life. Everyone knows I had a huge road accident. We were coming down to the family caravan that John Lyons had helped us get down at Marble Hill. And there's another man that needs to be mentioned, John Lyons. What a driver as well. He was such a champion in the hills of Donegal. Yeah. And as we know, he won the Donegal International Rally twice, I believe.
Yep.
So he was one of my idols.
Yeah, completely.
Another idol, and was a great man himself and Wendy, encouraging me, to keep at it and to win. And that was what it was all about. And I had great friends, like Tony Kelly was a great sponsor of James Cullen at the time, and the Four Lanterns, and all of those guys, supported James really well, really fast driver. And those were the people that I always wanted to compete against. But anyway, I was coming down to the caravan anyway, and I had a road accident. And I had the biggest road accident. It was terrible. I remember hitting a rock on the side of the road, back left-hand side of, it was an M3 that I was just after getting to celebrate the Donegal International Rally win, believe it or not.
Okay.
And I hit the wheel, and all of a sudden I went into this pendulum effect where the car just went sideways from one side of the road to the other, up the road, and then it gripped and went side over side. It rolled about 4 times, and then the nose of it caught, and it went end over end. Yeah. And I was just like a doll in the car, rolling about. I had my seatbelt on, but my hands, the windows went out of the car, and did my hands start flying all over the place. And I remember in the middle of the accident saying, "Please God, don't hurt me." And all of a sudden, the car finished upside down, and my arm outside the roof. I didn't know my arm was outside the roof because of what had happened. And it was only when I released the belt to get out of the car that one, I was upside down, and I landed on the headcloth.
Right.
And I went to squeeze myself out of the car and realized my arm is underneath the roof.
Yeah.
So that was a horrendous situation. and I didn't know how bad it was or how broken it was. It turned out to be a compound fracture. It was really bad breaks. It was complete mush, actually. And I remember saying to myself, I have to get out of this. And I had to, like a contortionist, I had to put my left leg around my arm and squeeze my body and squeeze my way out through what was a roof that was down. And it was only held up by the headrest of the car, the M3. It was a solid headrest. And that saved me. That really did save me. But to move my whole body around my arm, because it wouldn't move, it was going nowhere. That took me probably all of 30 minutes just to get my main body out of the car, because every inch you moved, you get jammed. And at some point, I could have basically got jammed, but I squeezed away until I got out, and then I had to step back over my arm again and go through the whole process in a 360-degree fashion to get my arm twisted back into the way it was normally positioned, which was the top of the arm was facing the roof. And to this day, you can see it there. I have the mark of where the paint was on this. The paint of the roof of the car actually soaked its way into my arm and gave me a nice little staining on my skin forever. So, so lucky to have my arm, I can tell you. So I remember sitting outside that car that night, and it was an old railway embankment that used to take the trains from the castle right through to Letterkenny, and I was sitting there anyway, Glenveigh Castle Railway, and I remember sitting on the side of it saying to myself, how are you ever going to get out of this? And there was cars, funny, driving past that night, and I went in at 10 to 10, and just around 9:30, I'm sitting outside the car, and every car that came past, I shouted, and I shouted so much, my voice got hoarse. No one would heard me, obviously didn't, and there I was until the next morning, trapped with my arm underneath the roof. I'm sitting outside the car, and I remember opening the door of the car then. It wasn't hard to open, it was in bits anyway. And didn't the front keys of my house fall onto my knees? And I said to myself, I remember watching a program probably a week to 10 days before that at home with my kids, my children, Matthew and Graham. And there was this little mole moling. And I remember saying to myself at the scene of the accident, if the mole was fit to dig its way through the soil and the ground, I surely can do the same thing with the front key of the house. And I started sawing and cutting the earth below my arm. And I dug until I couldn't dig anymore. And what was there in front of me? Only sally rods that I had pulled down with the car going through the accident. And the sally rods blocked me from going any further. And I remember saying to myself, I don't want anybody else rearing my children. I have to get these sticks cut. And that was the fight that was in me. I wanted to get home. I wanted to get out, first of all, get out of the accident. Get to hospital and all of the things that you can think of. And I started digging again, but I used the key of the front key of the house to cut the sally rods. And as I cut the sally rods, the key cut into my finger, and to this day it's there. The marks and the pain was excruciating. It was really, really tough going. And about 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm cutting away anyway. 3:30, 4 o'clock, I could see this darkness coming above me, and I'm going, there's the rain coming. It wasn't rain. it was every midget, it was every midgie that was ever in the bog in Donegal. They all arrived to the party. It was so bad. There was millions and millions of them landed, and they decided to have a feast day on me. And they started eating me. And they eat me alive. It was just horrendous. They got in under my arm, they got in under my skin, they got in under my legs. I don't have to tell you where they got to.
No.
And the pain, they ate me so badly, I was bleeding. So I'm now allergic to those mosquitoes, because that's what they are. They eat me alive in that bog that night. And I remember saying to God, look, I don't have any more pain. Just eat away. Look, there is no more pain. And I remember going through that pain threshold where I couldn't feel any pain. And at the same time, I announced to myself, I rubbed my face with the bog soil to stop them eating me. And I remember my ears and everything. They were into my ears. And I said, right, continue on, Andrew. So with my left hand, I started digging with the key. And I eventually got to a point where I could feel my hand underneath the car with my left hand. And I went to pull my hand out. And I pushed my hand in past these sally rods. And guess what happened? The man above decided to give me another lesson. The sally rods caught my left hand, and I couldn't go anywhere. Completely trapped. There I was, two hands completely under the car, trapped. And I remember saying, look, please let me go. Here I am. I can feel my hand. I didn't know what condition it was. I just wanted to get out of there. And oh my goodness, it was horrendous. So the lesson was, when my hand was in there, I tried to pull it out. The sally rods caught me. Like a hook, like a fish hook. And about 15 minutes later, I realized if I turn my hand to the left or to the right, it might release. And guess what? It released. I got my hand out. I didn't put it back in, I can tell you. And I got the left hand out, and I continued then to break the sally rods with the belt that I had on me. I remember getting it off, and I broke the belt 4 times. Breaking those sticks to the belt was no longer available to me. And out of nowhere, didn't my tie land out of the car beside me? Silk tie that I had on previously that day, and that continued to break the sticks. That tie was the savior of me. It saved me. It was so strong. It was fit to lap it around my wrist, get my knee against the car, and continue to pull and break the sally rods. And at about 6:10, did my hand come out, and I released it. I remember kissing it, saying, "Oh, am I glad to see you?" And I tied my arm to my chest and what was left of my hand and wrist, because it was flopping. It was just like a piece of, anyway, just flopping around, and tied my hand and got out onto the road to try and stop a car. And this car came screeching up to me, stood on the brakes, lifted the foot off the brakes and accelerated and drove off. They probably thought I was an old, maybe, I don't know, gypsy or something on the side of the road. But no one stopped, and I had to walk then for 1 solid mile. And I remember saying to myself, stay on the left-hand side of the road where the yellow markings are, because if you faint, you'll most likely fall into the ditch. Whereas if I walked the middle of the road and I fell or fainted, a car was most likely to come and run over me. And I walked for a mile to this lovely old man's house, Hugh McGinley, and rapped the door. I actually kicked the door, and he says, get away, get away. I says, no, I'm after having a car accident. I need your help. And he came down the stairs, opened the door, followed by his sister. What a lovely woman. And she was just home from on holidays with her husband. And she seen the condition of me, and she run upstairs, took the bedclothes off her bed, come back down and wrapped me up with her bedclothes.
Right.
And can I tell you, that was the nicest feeling.
I could imagine, yeah. Like,
I realised I was alive.
uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
That's what it meant to me at the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, off we went then. He got me into his wee Ford Orion and off to the hospital into Letterkenny.
Mm-hmm.
And I swear to God, he didn't cross 15 mile an hour the whole time. And I'm going, we need to be a little bit faster than this. I was saying to myself, I mean, we got to the mountaintop. I said to him, you could nearly freewheel from here. Meaning, if he would get her out of gear, she might have went a wee bit faster. And anyway, he says, no, I don't want to go too hard, son, because I don't want to hurt you. And that was he was so caring. He didn't want to hurt me. And we eventually got to the hospital, and his brother-in-law run in, and the doctors came out. One boy came out with a tube of morphine and a needle. And I remember the trousers been dropped on the spot and the morphine in.
Right.
And they looked at the injury, and it was so bad. It was so bad that I had to then head for Belfast.
Right.
But I never made it to Belfast. I was going to see a specialist in Belfast. At this point, Tony Kelly and Linda and the whole team got gathered up and met me at the hospital. And we headed for Belfast, but we stopped in Galvin on the way. And I met this great man called Sean Simpson. He was a specialist. At the time, with all the troubles back in the north of Ireland, and Ireland for that matter, these guys were used to putting people together.
Right.
And he looked at my injury. He says, you have no idea how bad this is. And I believe you're going to meet a Mr. Calderwood in Belfast. Now, that was organised by John and Wendy Lyons for me to go and see that specialist in Belfast. And he says, if you don't mind me saying, he's a great surgeon. And there are two people in Northern Ireland that can deal with this. He's one of them, and I'm the second one. I'm the other one.
Yeah.
And he says, you do not have time to go to Belfast. And I remember saying to him, you're my man. Let's get on with it. So he wheeled me down into theatre. And I remember this so clearly. He said to me, now, before I knock you out for the operation, have you any questions you'd like to ask me? I said, yes, Sean, there is. I want to know when I'll be back rallying. My words were, when will I be back racing again? And he says, what do you want to know that for? I says, I'm after winning the Donegal International Rally. He says, is that you? I says, that's me. Oh, and he says, well, here, that's up to you. That's up to you. And I never knew what he meant. And I'll tell you later on what he meant. But he says, that's up to you. And all I remember was going through the operation, coming out the other end, and I woke up and my arm and hand was up in the air on a sling above my head. And there it was. And I remember the nurse saying, Mr. Simpson has asked us to make sure you get bathed after you come round. And I said, oh, right, okay. He says, because you didn't have time to get cleaned up.
Right.
That wasn't the reason at all. It was to get the midges out of my body and the skin.
Yeah.
It took all of 1 week to get the midges away from the situation that I was in. So that was the start of the recovery process in '96. And I remember Sean saying to me, it'll take 1 millimeter per day, and you're 365 millimeters away from recovering, which meant a year. Are you saying to me it'll be a year before I'm rallying again? I says, nonsense, I'll be back rallying before that. I know I'm going to miss the Cork Rally, but I might make it for Galway the next year. And there we had to start the whole process of recovery.
That was part one of my conversation with Andrew Nesbitt. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you do like it, can you please like and share across all social media platforms? And if you're listening to Apple Podcast, can you please rate the podcast? It would be gratefully appreciated. The next part will be online next week, and that's every bit as enjoyable as this bit. So we'll speak to you soon, and take care.